Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Emotional Intelligence Pawdcast. I'm your host, Sandra Thompson, founder of EI Evolution, and I am super excited to take you on this incredible journey. We're going to be exploring the transformative world of emotional intelligence and empathy, guided by some truly remarkable humans and their fantastic four-legged friends. In each episode, we'll dive into inspiring and heartwarming stories about our beloved canine companions. We'll discover the unique and magical bonds we share with our dogs and uncover the profound lessons they teach us about understanding and managing our emotions. From tales of loyalty and love to moments of learning and growth, our furry friends have so much to offer when it comes to enhancing our emotional intelligence. We'll also discuss practical tips and insights on how to cultivate empathy and emotional awareness in our daily lives, inspired by the natural wisdom of our dogs. So sit back and relax, maybe even with your playful pup by your side, and join us for an enriching experience that celebrates the incredible ways dogs help us connect more deeply with ourselves and others. Welcome to the Emotional Intelligence Pawdcast.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm excited, and I'm kind of curious to know how this episode's going to go. This is our first author. Yes, our first author is our first author guest here on the Emotional Intelligence Pawdcast. Steve and Pepper, how are you?
We're really good. Pepper, for those who can see, is having loads of treats. So she's really happy. I, however, Sandra, not having any treats. So there's a flaw there in this whole gig.
There is a flaw, and it's funny, isn't it? Because I have a feeling that these animals are thinking, when can we next be on the podcast? Because I have never had so many delicious treats in my life in one go.
Yeah, this is definitely not the time of day where she normally gets treats, and she's looking suitably angelic, which is brilliant.
So watch out for this time tomorrow when it might be another, hello, I think it's time.
I ruined her. Well, in fact, no, Sandra, you've ruined her with me. This is what...
Yeah.
This is what's happened.
I'm happy to take the blame. Steve, let's start with you. Let's start with what you're about. Obviously, we met some time ago, but share with the audience a bit of background about you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. I've been really looking forward to this. So I'm Steve Hargreaves. I run the Compassionate Leadership Company, which I started about 4 years ago. It's a leadership and team development consultancy and coaching organisation. But I'm particularly interested in helping leaders and teams operationalize compassion. So that's the area I'm really interested in. How we help people, if indeed they need help, to not see compassion as something soft and fluffy and going around giving everybody hugs and being terribly nice to each other, but see it as the real powerhouse that compassion is. My professional background was social work, actually, about 26 years ago.
Right.
I can't believe I'm saying that, Sandra. I trained as a social worker in South Wales, and I worked initially in childcare services in a childcare disability team, and then older people services. And I got my first role in management. And I don't know, I think people's transition into leadership is always really interesting, Sandra. And mine was this. The director of social services came into our social work team meeting and said, I've got a secondment to a manager's job. Does anybody want it? And every single person's arm in the room went down to the ground as if, like, how dare you come in here and offer us that opportunity? And I went, yes, that sounds great. Count me in. And I think I did a pretty terrible job, but I really enjoyed that mix of working in the vocational world that I'd chosen and having an opportunity to work in this thing called, at the time, management. And that's where I kind of stayed for about 20 years for public sector and then the charity sector. Eventually as a director in St John Ambulance, which I loved, managing all of their frontline care and operational services. And I then became interested in this area of compassion. Is it useful to share how that became of interest, Sandra?
Definitely. Keep it going, okay. Steve, keep it going.
Well, three things really struck me. Whilst particularly as I was kind of becoming more of a senior manager in the organisations, I don't know about you, but I tend to find I get roped into things like can you do this investigation, please, into this grievance and disciplinary? Or can you chair this disciplinary and grievance? So three things really struck me. As I was doing those investigations, and as I was often chairing those meetings where things have got so difficult between colleagues, where they would describe things like, I just hate this person, they've ruined my life, I'm scared by them, I'm intimidated by them. Very real and very challenging circumstances, and not to diminish any of them, but so often when we tracked back, it came from, not always, but sometimes, and quite a lot, to, for example, you and I, Sandra, in a meeting where I said something to you that you thought was rude, it was impolite, it was disrespectful. It didn't get picked up in the meeting. I didn't seem to notice. You didn't get an apology. You didn't follow up with me later. And over time, a new relationship was forged between you and I, which was not a positive one, not a helpful one. And here we end up some years down the line in grievance territory and disciplinary territory. And I thought, well, how can we be in a situation where one of us or both of us is not having that tough conversation? That either I'm not aware that I'm being rude, disrespectful, impolite, and you, for very understandable reasons, don't feel you can come and have that conversation with me. So how can we do better? And I also saw how, when we lent into empathy and compassion in those circumstances, how much we could alleviate and prevent some of that suffering in the first place. And the second thing was, I had the role of Freedom to Speak Up Guardian in St John Ambulance. So I was a director of regional operations, but I had a real thing for leadership and coaching. And this whole area of psychological safety became really interesting to me. And this role existed in the NHS around helping people to speak up, speaking up on their behalf, speaking truth to power, looking at the systems where they were hindrances or enablers to people speaking up. So that was a real privilege. But also, I think what I learned there was the power of, when you speak up to someone, when you share a different idea, when you share an opinion, where you flag some feedback which is difficult, it seems obvious, doesn't it? But the real power, when the leader particularly listened, heard, and responded without judgment, with empathy, and took action. How powerful that was for the person who's had to speak up or feel courageous enough to speak up, and how much more empowering for the leader who doesn't respond in a guarded, defensive, attack and defend way, how much better it was for them, how much better of a learning experience it was for them. And then thirdly, one of my children was diagnosed with a chronic health condition a few years ago, and that was our first experience as a family being around chronic disease and illness in the family. And that's a whole other story. But what really struck me there, we'd never really had any involvement with hospitals at all. And suddenly we were thrust into this environment. And I noticed with my children, but particularly my child with the chronic health condition, how their ability to respond, their ability to be resilient, their recovery from being in hospital and having whatever needed to be done was so much more reflective of how much compassion they've been shown. Not the clinical care, which was always excellent. It was much more about, did I feel valued? Did I feel seen? Did I feel heard? Did the consultant know my name? Was I spoken to, or was I spoken about? In almost like micro ways, those things, even as my child was 9 years old, made such an impact about their recovery and about their willingness to go back in when needed. So those three things all together really keened my interest in this whole area of empathy, compassion, kindness, and how it plays out and how it can play out in organisations. There you go. That's like a big bio, wasn't it?
But it's all fascinating, isn't it? Because it's like all roads lead to this, all of the experiences that you've had where you've seen it exercised in different ways. So you talk about your own, well, if I heard you correctly, you talk about your own experiences of being a manager first off, and that you weren't very good at it. I mean, how did you know that you weren't very good at it? How would that be?
Well, because people kept telling me, Sandra, this was the thing.
Okay, that's different.
I may not have listened very keenly at the time, but people were telling me in different ways. What was interesting about that, and I often talk in my programs and workshops, the difference between being nice and being compassionate. And that's often quite a provocative part of any keynote or discussion, because there are lots of great things about being nice, being on time, being courteous, being polite. We love all of those things. But I often talk about when nice leads us astray, when nice becomes a barrier to us taking action. And I think what everybody would agree was Steve was a really nice guy. What a nice manager. What a nice person. But in terms of providing clear direction, clarity, being able to understand the numbers, all whatever it is, the dimensions of what effective management might be, very poor. Where I put my attention was very much in wanting to be a really nice and supportive and caring manager. And I don't, wish to diminish any of those things. They're really important, but they led me astray primarily because I didn't feel able and willing to have some of those courageous conversations, those conversations that mattered, that got to the heart of things. So you end up just managing with high levels of empathy, high levels of niceness, but your performance is plunging at the same time because in effect your empathy and niceness becomes a barrier to action.
Yeah,
And I think
understood.
that's where I was.
Yeah, no, I understand. So an incredible kind of stacked, I'm going to call it a stacked set of skills that matured, and you came to a point where you wrote your book. We'll come back to you in a little while. Let's now focus on Pepper and some
Where's she
of
gone?
the. I think she's done a runner because you stopped feeding her treats, which I don't blame her, quite honestly, Steve. Let's talk about Pepper and Pepper's backstory, because I'm pretty sure we'll come back to compassion and some of the theories, some of the ideologies, the models that you believe in, back to this beautiful puppy. So those of you that are watching on YouTube, here's Pepper, a beautiful black. I'm going to call her a lab. Is she a lab?
Well, she's actually, sorry, this is not me very professional on film, is it? But, I'm got a 13-month-old squirming Springador puppy.
Springador, a Springador.
So Pepper is a mix of Springer and Lab. And she's 13 months old, and she is absolutely lovely. So I'm going to put her down now because she's quite lovely.
Put her down. What's her backstory? Where did she come from? Did you get her from a very small puppy? What was the story, Steve?
Yeah, so we had her from a puppy, and I can't remember that, but it must have been, I don't know, what is it, 10 weeks or something? I should remember.
10 or 12 weeks. Normally it's around 12 weeks when they take them from their mummies. Yeah.
I think it was 12 or 14 weeks. So what happened was we had a 15-year-old German wirehead pointer who was a lovely, lovely dog, and we had her for 15 years. It did really well as a pointer. Talk about owners looking like their dogs. I had a really huge beard at that time, and it was a wirehead pointer with a huge beard, and we began to merge together. That's not quite the case with Pepper, although I seem to have lost all of my hair, so maybe that's what's happening with Pepper. But we lost our lovely dog Ruby at a weekend. And I think it was in the week after I was on a coaching network call with a group of peer colleague coaches, and we did the usual have of things. And I said, it was quite a tough weekend. We had to euthanize our dog, having that conversation. And one of my colleagues said, well, I'm really sorry to hear that, Steve. I've also got some news. I didn't know my dog was pregnant. And a few weeks ago, our dog had puppies. And then she panned the camera down off her laptop onto these 8 Springador pups. And of course, you know what's coming next? She said, and there's one here with your name on it, Steve, if you want it. And I was like, it was 4 or 5 days. Yeah, it was 4 or 5 days after our dog had died. And we were like, well, no, definitely can't have another dog. So I said, well, thanks very much. Trying to be all very, no. And I said to my wife off the call, and she said, yes, that's it. We're in. Count us in. That's it. So there was no discussion. There was no, let's do a pro and cons list. It was just, yes. It intuitively felt absolutely the right thing.
So hold on a minute. So you recounted this story. You didn't even show your wife a picture of the dog. She was in from just a suggestion. That's incredible.
That's a good point. I wonder actually whether my colleague sent a still or a photo or something. But pretty much I said, got these puppies, Springador, Black Lab. But at the time, actually, that was the important part of the story is my colleague said, well, we don't know whether it's a Labrador or a Springador. And she said the father, which is not, I know, a very canine term, is one of the neighbours. So she said, we're having DNA testing done at the moment. So they're either going to be, they're either Labradors, Labradors or they're...
Oh my gosh.
That came back. It said they're Springadors.
Right.
We knew who the offending neighbour was.
It's like a lottery, isn't it? It's like a lottery. Goodness.
So we just said, yeah, absolutely. But we kept it from our kids. We didn't tell our kids. And when we went to pick up Pepper, we lied to our kids and said, we're going for a day out near London. And the weather, Sandra, was appalling. There is no way you'd set off from Bristol in that weather to go anywhere. I mean, it was awful. It was just terrible. My kids were thinking, what on earth are we doing? So we drove up the motorway. It was in Pangbourne, and I had this elaborate lie. So I turned off the motorway, went into Pangbourne village, and I said, our friend said we can park the car in their driveway. So this got more, I can't believe. So we parked the car in the driveway. I said, and then out popped this big black lab, which was Pepper's mum, and out came the owner, my colleague, who said, "Oh, hello there, Steve. Oh, do you want to pop in? Anybody need the loo or anybody need a drink?" So my kids went inside. This is try to shorten this story. Kids went inside, and of course, in their lounge was this puppy pen, and all of the puppies were there. My kids were like, "Oh, fantastic! Oh,
this is Christmas. Forget anything else. This is Christmas,
right.
Steve."
So my daughter goes up to the pen, and this is no lie, Sandra. Out of the 8 puppies, wouldn't you know it, the one that came straight to my daughter was Pepper. And all of the puppies had bandanas around them.
Okay.
And this one had Hargreaves embroidered on it, our surname. We didn't know this was going to happen. And my son went, "Is that dog called Hargreaves? It's got Hargreaves on the collar." He said, "That's our name." And then the penny dropped. And my son went, "Are we having a puppy?" I said, "Yeah." "Is that it?" I said, "Yeah, that's Pepper." Tears.
Of course.
Everywhere. Tears everywhere. Then my daughter said, "When can we take it home?" And I said, "Right now." And then more tears.
My gosh.
Obviously, my wife and I won the award for the best parents ever. Which didn't last.
Apart from the lying, anyway. Obviously, but
I mean, we are really adept at lying. But yeah, so we are now the best parent. Well, so we were the best parents, and now we're into my son's 15 and my daughter's 13. So we're just idiots, aren't we?
The thing is, so I have to say, I'm a bit of a sucker for YouTube and TikTok and little videos of dogs and people and people's reaction to dogs. And the one that absolutely gets me going every single time is when it's Christmas time and someone brings a box in and the child opens it up and there's a split second of nothing. There's the shock and then there's the tears. And the parents are just like, they're in a blend of, "Oh, have we done the right thing? 3, 2, oh, I think it's okay." But, tears of joy. And that's what I'm imagining happened there, Steve, really.
Complete joy. And, it reminded me, and I'm a fairly happy-go-lucky kind of sounds a bit cliche, a bit positive, glass half full. I like to laugh. I'm quite playful in my workshops and programs. But it made me just think, actually, that's joy right there. And I want some more of that because sometimes I think what I've mistaken for joy, sometimes my bar is quite, actually it's just, I'm having a pleasant time. That was joy.
Yeah,
that was sheer, unabashed joy.
Yeah.
Until we remembered what it was like having a puppy, because it had been 15 years since we did that. So I'm not going to kid anybody that it remained joy.
So the question here is, did you get them to sign a contract to say, "We will walk the dog, we will feed the dog, we will"? I've heard of people getting these children to sign these contracts, putting it on the fridge, and then of course 2 months later, "I'm just too busy," or "I'm just popping out," and they're like, "Look at the contract." And of course,
Yeah,
it's a
I'm not going to
nonsense.
do the Instagram, everything is wonderful whole thing here. No, we didn't. And my kids are lovely, but there's just no way that would have got any traction in our household, whatever. My wife and I knew, oh, this is also stereotypical, that probably I'm going to be walking the dog predominantly because I'm the early bird, and it will be me and you. And as soon as the kids see, with respect, a poo on the sofa, then that's it. It's all over. Although
But
that hasn't happened.
she looks like a real bundle of joy. So she's 13 months old. So
Yeah.
let's talk about that for a minute, because of course before we came on air, we were talking about the fact that she's developing, she's growing, she's changing. Let's cover that for a bit, if we may.
Yeah, well, I don't want to suggest that I'm in any way a dog psychologist, and if any of them are listening, huge apologies if I do any undermining of your esteemed profession. But what's been interesting to see is, well, how quickly she's developed. I suppose what we might broadly call some sort of emotional skills and emotional intelligence. But the things I was thinking about this earlier, and I jotted a few things down because when you asked me to come on this, what it's really helpfully required me to do is pay much more attention. And I don't know about you, but a lot of the work that I do, I'm always asking people, pay attention to what you're paying attention to.
Yeah,
Where
of
is your
course.
attention? So
Yeah.
you've given me a gift. I really had to pay attention.
Yeah.
And the things that have really struck me is Pepper is amazing at living in the moment. It seems very obvious, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But she really does pay attention to what she's paying attention to, which is what's now.
Yes.
And that's been kind of consistent. So she's always consistent in how she expresses her needs. But I think as she's got a bit older, we've figured it out together.
Okay.
I suppose from that is she's got to a point where she's now clear. This is how I express my needs, and I've needed to catch up.
Okay.
So one of the things I really noticed around this, she's incredibly consistent. When she wants something or needs something, she conveys it to me in exactly the same way every time.
Right.
If I don't pick up on it, it's because I'm not noticing.
Okay.
I suppose that's my point. So what I've seen her develop is that consistency. She sometimes sits right next to me and stares at me. I don't know if your dog has ever done it. It's completely unnerving. I'll be on the sofa, and yes, the dog is on the sofa as far as I'm concerned. She is welcome up there.
Yeah.
And she sits on the sofa and she's literally an inch away from my face staring at me. And it's really, she doesn't blink. It's really unnerving.
So when we had, when we had Bonnie, the dog, she would stare, and then if you didn't pay attention, she'd put her paw up, and if you weren't getting that, then it would be barking. It's just like, for goodness sake, I'm trying the whole looking at you, touching you, now it's sound. Yeah. So you were saying.
That's absolutely it. So I think how she's developed is she's become much more effective at communicating her needs. It's quite obvious what she wants. I've got really poor at not noticing. So if she's reached that stage, she wants to go out, and I haven't noticed she's been sat at the door for 5 minutes looking out into the garden. So that's developed, definitely, and we've developed a bit together around that. When she wants to eat, she brings me a snake. She's got this snake here. This is her favourite toy.
So this is for those that are watching, it looks like a plastic snake.
It's a big orange snake, and we put her food in here.
Oh, you put it's got kind of a slit all the way along it, and you put food. Oh, so that's one of those toys that gets the mental stimulation and slows her down on eating. Is that what that is?
Yeah, it absolutely
fabulous.
Is. And what I've noticed about this is, in terms of particularly in the last few months, is whereas I would have to go and get this and put her food in it, she now brings it to me. She now brings it to me. There's two ways. If there's a visitor, she brings it to them because she's really pleased. She wants them to see her toy because she wants affection and she wants approval. And this is what I realised with Pepper and dogs. They're really clear about what they want. And I often thinking, I don't know about you, Sandra, but often find in like real life, we're very, we have to spend a lot of time guessing what somebody else wants, what somebody else thinks. They're communicating something to us, but I'm not entirely sure that is what they're trying to communicate. And they really want me to guess. And I think we're terrible guessers.
Yeah, I'm with you 100% on that.
What I've realised is Pepper doesn't need me to guess. She just needs me to notice.
Yeah.
She's really clear about what she wants, when she wants it, and she's always consistent. which seems to be something that us complicated human beings rarely appear to be.
Yeah.
So I find that really important. And to use that phrase, keep the main thing the main thing, she keeps the main thing the main thing. So if the main thing is food, that's what she's focused on. If the main thing is rolling around in the garden, that's what she's focused on. There doesn't seem to be any like past or future or anxiety. It's just, I am totally in this moment, and this moment is awesome or not great, or and that. So what you see from her, the emotions, the expression, all come from, this is, I am authentically who I am now in this moment, and the behaviour or the emotions that I'm conveying are absolutely authentic.
Yeah, incredible. And it's really interesting that she's been consistent, you're noticing things, she's making it really easy for you. And I know that when we've had certain breeds of dogs, they've made it plain English, as it were, what they need. You've just got to pick up, and you've just got to remember as well that this is clearly this thing, not that thing, although the thing might be, the way they demonstrate it might be slightly similar, but there are nuances, and it is up to us to reciprocate that attention. I get it. It's great.
Yeah. I think that's beautifully put, actually. I think that's absolutely bang on. And when I bring it back into the human realm, my child who's been diagnosed with chronic health condition, who's in remission currently, when they first were diagnosed, one of the symptoms that go with that is chronic fatigue.
Right.
And when they would come back from school, they would say, I would say, how are you? And they'd say, I feel tired. So of course I'd be an amazing dad, Sandra, and go, right, up to bed early then, job done. Until I realised quite quickly that they weren't really communicating with me after about a week or so. And we had a discussion, and they said, actually, Dad, you're not listening. And of course what we realised together, which seems so obvious now, that tired meant 30 other things, from angry, frustrated, to sad, to lonely, to completely and utterly. So we had to develop some emotional literacy together and get much more granular, so that they could help me not have to guess.
Yeah.
So we need to develop that language, and I could respond much more effectively to their needs, so they felt valued and seen and heard. Wow. So we developed that together.
Brilliant.
What I find with Pepper is we don't need that, because she doesn't have that same breadth. But it's really clear, all I've got to do is notice. I don't have to guess. I suppose that's my point. I don't have to guess. I just have to pay attention. I have to remember to pay attention.
Yeah. Do you think there's something about her being a part Springer that brings that out? Because I know that what I think I understand about Labradors is that they are, they're incredibly energetic. They're a bit all over the place. They're really great. Wow, off the go. But the Spaniel bit is quite focused, quite decisive, quite task. That kind of blend might be that you don't get mixed messages. They're pretty clear. What would you say to that?
Yeah, that's a great point, actually. I hadn't thought about that. I think that's a really great point. The level of focus that Pepper has is significant. If we're out on a walk, it's all about that scent. We've begun to do some scent work with her recently. We'll hide things in the garden.
Okay.
Usually the snake, and say, "Where's the snake?" But she'll be incredibly focused. It's not like there's a ball, I'll bring it back to you. It's, I've got to go and find that thing.
Right.
And when she's found it, oh my goodness, is she happy to share that with us? But nothing else matters.
Yeah.
Anything else could be going on in the garden. That's what's needed. So that focus is a real strength. But of course, like so many strengths, it can really lead you astray, can't it? Because actually sometimes I need her to focus on the other things that are around her. And of course the challenge with that is that intent focus means she's kind of blind to other things. So sometimes reading the room isn't what I would say is a great strength. Like there's other stuff happening. There's like some cars over there, and there's some, it's like, so I think it's like anything, isn't it, where the strength brings all that power but can also lead us astray. And I think it's something to do with maturity and experience. But sometimes that focus is problematic. So.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I get it. And then what about how she interacts with all of you as a household? You know, we talked about compassion and empathy. Are there any particular things that she does that demonstrates her ability to not just be heard, as it were, in inverted commas, but to understand how all of you are feeling? Is she doing any of that kind of work?
Yeah, and I think when I do a shorthand of compassion, it's empathy plus thoughtful and meaningful action. And I often if we sat in the lounge and when one of my children is struggling, or one in particular with health, there's an awareness of that. So there's no rough play with my children, not because I've asked that of her.
Yeah.
She's figured that out. And there's
Mm.
particularly no rough play with my one of my children when they're unwell, and it doesn't matter how much energy she has,
Yeah.
and she can be rough play with me. We can
Yeah.
be running around the garden, and we can come in, and even at this age,
Yeah.
she'll know, so and so's on the sofa under a blanket. That's where I'm going to go to sit quietly.
Right.
And we don't get there every time, but that's
Yeah.
definitely shifted in the last few months. So I don't know what's going on there, but there's a paying attention, and there's a sense of empathy there. But in the same way that she'll pick up on frustration, and we're going through the walking stage at the moment, which is I walk, she pulls, and she's not a big dog, but my goodness, she's strong.
Wow.
My tennis elbow. I'm 51 now, so my back seems to have gone all over the place. She's ruining me, and I just keep saying to her, "Why? I don't know why you're pulling. This is just ridiculous. Why we're not going?" So I'm putting a human logic on this. So it's been a real challenge, and there are times, particularly 6 o'clock in the morning, where I don't want to get pulled about everywhere. And we're doing training,
Yeah.
we're doing all of those things with it, and I've been here before, and I know it's a matter of consistency and time.
Mm.
But what's really affected me here is I need to regularly focus on my breathing to ensure that I emotionally regulate effectively, because I could easily trip into, I'm getting really angry, I'm getting really frustrated, and that leads to behaviours which aren't helpful to anyone. So actually, that mindful pause, that recognising, I'm into, my sympathetic nervous system's kicking in. I'm into flight and fight.
Yeah.
I need to breathe low and slow, to help me regulate is hugely powerful. And she's consistent. She's just doing what she's doing. So I've had to be much more effective at that. But particularly, with my wife, there's not the rough play. That's where it gets focused on me. So I think she has picked up, however that happens, on that very effectively, which I think is a real skill, because as humans, sometimes we can really struggle in that area, can't we?
No,
So
yeah,
sometimes
for
she
sure.
can read the rooms. Sometimes she can read the room so well,
Yeah.
and other times not so much. And she's been jumping up quite a bit, which I think can be particular for that breed, jumping up to sort of when people come into the house. And she's always really friendly, but she jumps up. And what I've noticed more recently, sometimes when somebody comes in, she'll literally skid across the floor with her bottom on the floor in a sitting position, and she'll just sit there beautifully and look at them, waiting for them to pet her. And I think, this is amazing. We've nailed it. Nothing I've done. And then other times she'll do that and then leap towards them, and I think, oh no, what's happening? So you see these bits of emotional regulation happening really effectively, holding back and restraining those impulses.
Yeah.
But then in the same span, it can all go out the window.
Yeah,
and
sure.
I imagine that's a maturity thing. But you can see her. I'm just going to self-regulate here. I'm not going to jump up at this person, but I'm going to jump up at this person.
But I suppose that, people must bring their energy to her, where she must perceive, it's all right here, it's not all right here, I'm not too sure I'm going to try it on. But I think the interesting thing that you've mentioned here as well, Steve, is the fact that you're consciously aware of how you're showing up with her. So when she's pulling, you're needing to be able to regulate your emotions so that you don't lose your cool with them, because they don't really understand why you'd shout. Or, you know, the classic thing I was talking to someone about the other day was, you know, you throw the ball, the dog doesn't come back, the dog doesn't come back, and then when it does eventually come back, you see owners shouting or hitting their dogs, and you're like, why would they come back to you if you're going to treat them that way? So the lesson, I guess, here is her own self-regulation, because she's still isn't she a puppy until she's 2?
Yeah, I mean, she's in adolescence, I think.
But yeah,
she's a pup. Well, she's like a 15 or 16-year-old.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
With all of the great things that come with that, and all of the impulse and recklessness that come with it as well. but I think that's yeah, I think that's a really good point. So that patience is really important. And of course, I'm not naturally a very patient person. You know, I can be quite reactive. So it is a choice, you know, and it is remembering I need to breathe. You know, so for me, that breathing, that breath work, that mindful pause is so important, as it is through life. Moving us from reaction to response. So I need to respond to paper. Yeah. I need to not react, even though I'm just so furious.
Yeah. Oh, indeed. I mean, you know, when you get taken for a walk like that, even from a small dog, it gets a little bit tiring after a while, doesn't it? So just to close up, Steve, tell me then, in sum, what does it mean to have a dog in your home? What does it mean to have this 4-legged friend hanging around? What's it all about?
Well, I would definitely use that word joy. And that's not me underplaying some of the frustrations and stress that come with it, but it is joy. That would be ultimately, I think, where it's come from is joy. I think learning would come into it as well.
Yeah.
You know, for my kids, my wife, and for me, we all take different learning from that.
Sure.
In terms of how children react with the dog, how they care for the dog. What will happen if they forget to feed the dog? Because my wife and I are out and they've forgotten to feed the dog, and what that will lead to.
Yeah.
So I think there's something about cause and effect. You know, but joy. I think family in the sense of, you know, sometimes when life is really busy, and you can forget sometimes just to show up for your family in a really present way. What I found with Pepper is she forces us to do that.
Yeah.
In the best possible way. Because, you know, she requires you to be present. And I found that for all of us, to varying degrees, at varying times, that enables us to be much more in the moment there. I would say joy being really important. But I've not been without a dog really at many points in my life. You know, my previous dog was our first dog, but growing up with dogs.
Sure.
So for me, it's more, why wouldn't you have a dog? I know not everybody can, but if you can, I'm just not, you know, I'm totally biased. Why wouldn't you? Because it only gives. But you can list all the things that maybe you won't be able to do with your dog. Yeah, absolutely. Which is why I don't do the pro and cons list. Yeah, absolutely. It's not easy to go away. Yeah. But I'm at home 7 days a week. I'm not away on holiday 7 days a week. So the most important thing is connection to home and family. That's what Pepper helps and brings, not highlights the things that maybe we've had to compromise on because of the dog, because the benefits outweigh, even when she's doing my head in, Sandra.
Wow. Thanks, Steve. That's awesome.
I love talking about dogs.
So do I. It's a good job, isn't it? Thank you so much for coming on, and thank you to Pepper as well, who's done a runner. Good job. The treats have run out.
Asleep.
So is she there? Oh, she's there. She's waiting. She's waiting patiently on the floor.
Springador. Yeah, she's crashed out.
Crashed out. It's all the excitement. It's been great to see you, and thank you so much for all of these gems. There's some really great stuff. It's going to be really tricky for me to pick one little bit out to put on LinkedIn, so you've made a task for me there. Thank you.
You are welcome.
It's great to see you, and I'll speak to you soon. Thanks again.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
So that's a wrap. Thank you so much for tuning in. If we've not connected already, you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm on there most days. You'll find me under CXEI Sandra. And also, if you want to find out a bit more about my work, then you can pop along to my website, www.eievolution.com. One final thing, and in the spirit of customer experience and feedback, I wonder if you might consider leaving a review on Spotify. I'll leave that one with you. So until the next time, be well and be pawsome. Ta-ra!